And for those of you who don't know me, I'll do a really quick introduction. I'm Fran Richardson. I work for Action with Communities in Cumbria, and I manage the community-led homes hub for Cumbria and Lancaster. I've set this event up, and a series of 4 events up today with Becky from Lancaster City Council, and we're covering some of the topics that keep cropping up in relation to housing and community-led homes. We've had a really interesting conversation already this morning about affordable homes and how communities are addressing affordability. And we're focusing in this session on on community approaches to later life, how people choose the communities the communities of housing provision that they would prefer in later life. Also looking later on today at refurbishing empty homes and how that's being a really important avenue to creating new communities and upskilling communities in places where empty homes are otherwise a real problem, tackling a number of social problems at the same time there. That's really important work. And also we're hearing from the Marmalade Lane crew this afternoon about their integration with a planned development, about how they worked with development that was already on the cards to find a way of getting real good community benefit from that process. So some really interesting conversations going on today and all over the place all of the time about how communities are tackling housing. If I could just really briefly explain what I mean when I'm talking about community-led housing and make sure that that's a shared understanding. The sort of basic ground rules are that community-led homes will be homes which are built or reclaimed by local people. The development or use of those buildings will be supported by the local community, and ultimately it will be owned or managed by the community and protected in perpetuity, so that the benefit to the community cannot be lost. That's a really important feature, and particularly a vital part of the conversation when we're talking about investment in these projects to make sure that they can't be lost. It's not just money to create new buildings which go into a private market. The Community-Led Homes Hub, there's a number of hubs across the country, and our role really is to try and make sure that communities have the support they need to get the job done, and that we can hook people up with the right professional support that they need, whether that's planning advice or friendly architects or people who can give a second opinion on certain elements of feasibility, those kinds of questions. But also trying to navigate relationships with the local planning department and Homes England and various others as the conversations progress. So a lot of sort of matchmaking and trying to make sure that we've got good information to share with people, but also crucially, and this is part of what today's conversation is about, is this networking idea, sharing information between groups and making sure that people have an opportunity to hear from each other and learn from each other. So we have an informal group that meets once a month, and people from the Cumbria and Lancaster areas get together on Zoom, and it's just a small informal catch up so people can offer support and advice and ask questions in a kind of peer support way that they wouldn't get elsewhere. Ideally, we'd be doing it over a glass of wine somewhere comfortable, but we're all doing it from our own sitting rooms at the moment, and that seems to be working at the one level. So in the spirit of sort of sharing what's going on and making and inspiring new action, we've asked people to come and help us broaden our vision of what's possible. And Jude has very kindly agreed to come and join us from New Ground, which I'm sure you'll introduce properly, Jude, but it's the group that is the older women's co-housing group in North London.
North London, yeah.
Yes. So one of the big benefits of the Zoom approach is that we can benefit from knowledge all over the country without people having to travel too far. So we're really grateful for Jude coming to join us. We are hoping that Chris Coates will join us too from the Holton Senior Co-housing Group. unfortunately, we are aware from our earlier meeting this morning that the place where Chris lives is currently having major internet problems. So we may not hear from him at all, but we will just carry on and see what happens. And if I can just ask for your patience as we improvise slightly as we develop our conversation. Final thing to say before I hand over to Jude. I can see most of you have got your screens muted. If I could just ask that we stay muted while we're not speaking, just to avoid any background interference. We'll be showing a short video as part of Jude's presentation, and at that point it might also be useful if we turn our screens off, just because that gives my bandwidth a better chance of getting you the sound and pictures in one piece. But we'll take that one step at a time and see how we go. But thank you very much for your patience with that. If you do want to make any comments or raise any questions, obviously we can do that when Jude has done her little presentation and we've seen the video. But if you want to chuck things in the chat, that's fine. We'll pick up on those and try and have a reasonably free-flowing conversation after the presentations are over. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jude to introduce herself.
Hello everybody, it's nice to be here. My name is Jude Tisdall, as it says on the little box, and I'm from Newground in North London in Barnet, and we've lived here for 5 years. We moved in just before Christmas 2016, and we moved in, the builders were still here. We decided to move in when the builders were here, because if we hadn't, we'd probably still be waiting to move in. They didn't fancy the idea of working alongside 26 stroppy women, so they got on with the job very quickly. But I'm going to let Fran show you the film, and after that I'll give you, you'll see who we are, but I'll give you an overview, and I will talk to you about what it is like living here, what we need to do, the kind of things we've discovered, and all the practical things as well as the social things that we put into place. So Fran, if you'd like to show that, please, that would be great.
Jude.
I'm not getting any sound. I don't know about others.
No, there's no sound.
We've got 26 women who know each other, share core values, do things together, and look out for each other. What better neighbours could you ask for?
Co-housing is where people have their own individual homes, which they can own and rent individually, and then they will also have some shared resources, places where they can meet, have a meal, do things together.
I found the co-housing model in Holland. The Dutch government had alighted on this idea as one that would keep older people healthier, happier, more active, and hopefully reduce their demand on health and social care services.
Inevitably, as you get old, you feel less safe in the world. And I think here you feel safe. When I was left on my own, I didn't want to go and live in a residential home of any kind, or a retirement village sounds awful to me. And I didn't want to stay on my own entirely, and I didn't really want to impose on my children. So I started to look around for a different way of living.
I've never had any outside space before, so I'm learning with these plants. It's just lovely having this outside space. Okay, so this is my lounge, and the thing I love most about this room is the high ceilings, because it just gives me this sense of space and light, which actually, you get up in the morning and it immediately makes you feel good. When you rent from a council, you feel you haven't got any input into your life. Hello. You just pay your rent and that is it. Whereas here, I pay my rent to the Housing Association, but I'm involved in every decision that goes on here. I gradually learned about co-housing and the fact that we are managing ourselves. Everything has to be spoken about. We clean together, we garden together. And in these days of isolation and loneliness, it's a wonderful thing to be able to belong to a group like this.
We cook once a week. We've had 29, 30 odd come because people bring friends or relatives.
We arrived yesterday, and as you can tell, now I'm at work. Yes.
I didn't go looking for co-housing, but it just seemed an ideal situation, that people would be looking out for each other.
Oh, that's fun. What's the next exercise? Left hand.
Oh, that's your brain.
Oh, no. Right, so this is
no.
1 minute.
1 minute left hand. What are we drawing?
I think it'll keep us younger longer. We're going to last longer. I hope. I expect. Hello. You remembered your sonnies.
How are you doing now?
I think it's fantastic that she's come to a nice little community. That's the main thing about it. And they all look out for each other. They'll do things together. And I'm a bit redundant, really. I don't have to come down here once a week and play Scrabble and have a meal, you know.
Oh, you don't have to. It's not compulsory.
It's just like, you've just got so much else going on.
I fit you in.
I'm not your highlight anymore, am I?
Oh, you are.
We're already spending billions on the health service and on social care. If you can reduce demand through housing older people in communal supportive situations like new ground co-housing, you can make huge savings.
I would say most of the interest now in new co-housing schemes is coming from older people. And so this scheme, when it was launched, when people moved in, they had a little clip on the BBC News website, and I think by the end of the second day it had over 4.5 million hits.
The more people that try to set up co-housing, the more successful it's going to be in this country. It's been hard for us, but we hope that it will be much faster for people in the future and that there'll be more help from government.
There needs to be incentivisation for older people to move to somewhere that meets their needs, not just their housing needs, but their needs for social connectedness. Being able to effect things, to decide things, and not have everything done to you and for you is, I think, what the new old are demanding.
I feel 100% better than I did before I moved in here. My quality of life, how I feel, how I engage with people. I want to tell everybody about co-housing.
I think this is the way to feel independent and strong, as long as you can be strong and independent. I think this is the way to do it.
I love that film. I think it's great. I did everything see and hear that really well.
No, it got a bit dodgy, the sound, but I'm glad you were able to show it. So as you can see, we're a group of women living here, and the woman who spoke at the end, we're a group of women between 50, well, we moved in, we were 51 and 80 something. Now we're 55 and 93. And since moving in, nobody's left. We're all still here. Nobody's been ill, or, well, there's been illness, but nobody's been seriously hospitalized. Nobody's died, because we are getting older. We know that's going to happen. Nobody's chosen to move. And we have 25 flats here, and they're 1, 2, and 3 bedroomed. And there are 17 of them are bought outright, leasehold, and the other 8 are housing association. We have a partnership with Housing for Women, and they manage their flats. The woman you saw, Heidi, who spoke, at the end, she is our oldest resident, and Heidi is 93, which is amazing. She still works, she still lectures, she still writes. Before COVID, she traveled to lecture. And she is amazing. She is on it in every sense of the word. She's proactive with everything. In fact, her and another of the 2 oldest women, 2 years ago, just before lockdown, and I think I'm really pleased they did it, they went on a road trip from Vancouver down to Big Sur together. They're just amazing, the 2 of them. Yes, we are a group of 26 people living here. As I said, the oldest woman is Heidi. The youngest woman, Anne, she still works. In fact, quite a few people still work. And, you know, we all have families and we've outside interests, but we have a commitment to this community. We're involved in an ongoing way, in a proactive way, to ensure not just the smooth running of the buildings, but in planning for the future, so as to ensure we're economically and socially sustainable. And Fran said something about that earlier on, about this kind of housing. We're not community-led, it's a co-housing project, which is slightly different. But Fran talked about this kind of housing being available ongoing, that it doesn't fall into to make money out of it, a kind of a property development thing. And we are totally committed to that. And what we do a lot of things to make sure we're sustainable going forward. And I'll talk about that in a little while. But from the very early days, when we started about creating this community, it was almost 15 years ago. I wasn't part of it then. And in fact, there's only one woman still here who was part of that earlier group. You know, people got fed up waiting to find a site. They wanted to move on with their lives. Some died. 2 people ended up having to go into care. There's only one person, but different people joined along the pathway, the journey of that 15 years. There was huge disappointments in looking at sites and finding a site. We finally found the site. It was an old school in Barnet in North London. And then we had a huge fight, not a fight, but we did, well, yes, it was a fight with planners to get here. And, but all these years on, 5 years ago, we moved in. And what I would say was those early years of working together, having hopes together and disappointments together and getting to know each other were really, really important. We were able to build up a social community. So it wasn't just about the physical buildings, but we built up an understanding of each other. We were able to build policies together. We were get to know each other, and we worked with architects and planners in the end. And because we were going to be the end users and we had control up to a certain point over things, we could decide what we wanted. We had some brilliant architects who worked with us, who listened and advised and told us quite clearly when we were actually expecting far too much for the money we were putting in and the site we had. And they're still our friends, these you know, really friendly to our ideals. They bring groups of people here. They are now doing mostly this kind of work, creating this kind of property. But as I say, the time that we had together was central. And I think it was key to creating the community we had. The social architecture of a community is equally important as the buildings. We found that. And as I said, we've been living here for 5 years now. And so I'm going to talk a little about what it's like actually living here. You can ask questions later on if you need to know about the journey and partnerships of getting here. But I just want to tell you what it's like living here. I think, you know, if people have been in relationships, married, living together, the first year is always kind of getting to know each other and kind of settling down and getting over the honeymoon period. But we had to do that with 25 people. It was a nightmare sometimes because, you know, we knew each other, but we hadn't lived together. And we had to look at how to create the balance between community and privacy, which is very important. We managed it. We're still managing it. It's an ongoing thing, like any relationships develop in any family, but we work at it and we're committed to it. So again, going back to what Fran said about making sure this place is sustainable, it's really, really important, both for us and the people who follow us. And so what do we do to make sure that works? Well, we manage everything here. We're supported in the management of the physical building by a managing agent. One of the first things we did when we moved in was to tender and interview different managing agents. We were clear that we wanted somebody who would agree a set fee with us rather than a 10% or the way some agents work, because we wanted to be able to plan financially. We didn't want to get landed with things that we weren't expecting. And they're fantastic. 5 years on, we've still got the same managing agents. They're hugely helpful. They work with us on everything. We set our own service charges. I think if you're a group working together, if you're in a development, I think it's really, really powerful to be able to decide what you're spending your money on. Our service charges cover the usual things: insurance, cleaning, general maintenance, pest control, service contracts. I can send a list to Fran of all the kind of things our service charges cover, and she can issue that to everybody if she wants to, if anybody wants it. And I'll send a copy of the notes. I'm talking from notes, as you can see, and I'll send a copy of those to Fran if you want to have those later. One of the things we decided when we moved in, along with the managing agents, that we had an independent surveyor come in to do a 10-year plan on the kind of monies we would need to spend in maintaining the building over the next 10 years. And taking into account the warranties that are in place now, but won't be in place in 5 years or 10 years time. And we took all that into account. So not only do our service charges cover the ongoing things we have to do every year, we have a sink fund, a reserve fund, and based on that 10-year plan that we got from this surveyor. And so we have a sink fund that we add to every year, and that's from service charges. Our service charges, as I said, are decided by us, and they're divided quite equally. A 3-bedroom flat is X amount, a 2-bedroom X amount, a 1-bedroom X amount. We don't go on the square footage. It's just easier to do it that way. And the Housing for Women flats, we just bill them for the service charges on their 8 flats every year. So when we moved in, I mean, one of the things obviously things come up. One of the things, we've had a lot of latent defects to deal with. And we have discovered that the warranty through NHBC, and this is something if you're doing a new build, has an excess of £10,000 on it. And if things go wrong in an individual flat, they should be covered, but £10,000, it's very, you know, unless the whole place falls into a sinkhole, £10,000 is not the, you know, if something, the heating went wrong in a flat, that's not covered by the warranty. It wasn't the boilers, it was the underfloor heating, and it wasn't covered. We've had dreadful problems with the roof, and it will cost far in excess of £10,000 to fix it. The builders have written it off, they don't want to know, but luckily we have a warranty with NHBC, and it will cost more than £10,000. I don't know, we haven't been able to find out if there is that excess of £10,000 is a kind of a standard thing from NHBC, but I would suggest if you're building from scratch, you look and see what the various warranties could be and might be. We're so sorry we didn't know about that, because, you know, we're spending a lot of money because of that excess. The other thing we discovered when we moved in, we had a problem with the doors. All our doors are, you know, the right width for future living if anybody needs wheelchairs, etc. Our internal to the flats and external doors have all those in place. But the doors in the common areas are very heavy. We're very well insulated, and but the doors, because of that, they're heavy steel frames and they're not automated. So we had to look at that, and that, of course, didn't come under any kind of insurance. It was something we hadn't copped onto when planning the building. And the architects were brilliant, but they were looking at the kind of the aesthetics as well once they got over the actual building plans. And that cost us a lot of money. But again, our managing agents, who hadn't in any way when they set the standard fee, which hasn't gone up in 5 years, mind you, they took on kind of project managing it for us. They were great, but it cost us something like £15,000 to £20,000 to replace or to fix the doors to become automated. Yeah, it was a shock, and we had to find that money amongst us. You know, you don't plan for that in the first year of moving into a place. And there's been a few things like that. So if, you know, we're talking about older housing, I think there's more advice now. I mean, you know, the Hub France talked about, we had nothing like that. We just, you know, moseyed along, and there was no kind of support groups as there are now. But I would suggest that you always get somebody who looks at the building from a future thing for you, so that you make sure that the kind of things that all, I mean, some of our floors, for example, into different areas have slight lips, and we've had to then make sure that we put kind of little ramps on them for people who are finding it harder to walk, etc. So as well as making your building beautiful, do look at the kind of things that you need to secure yourself against in the future. We've set up various teams here. Not everybody is part of a team, because some people are getting, I mean, although I cite a wonderful Heidi, some people are older, they're in their late 80s, and they have become, you know, less able. So the younger people, the 50 and 60-year-olds, tend to do a lot of the work. But we have teams. We have a management team. There's 7 people on that, and they're elected every year at our AGM, and they oversee everything. We have teams for a financial team, a buildings team, gardening team, household, service charges, communications, etc., etc. So everybody is involved. I think it takes, on average, probably a day a week for everybody to, you know, to contribute to the community. And that's an average. I mean, sometimes people are, you know, have family commitments or work commitments, or they're away, so somebody else will pick up will pick up the slack in that area. But mostly, most people are involved with something. Budgets are discussed at our monthly business meeting. We agree service charges, as I already said. If we've got any expenditure, we agree it. Everybody has a vote, or you know, to either say yay or to block something we suggest. But as well as having our service charges, we also have an additional, what we call the household internal budget for bits and pieces. And the money, the income from that comes from car park. We have a car park, and car users pay for the use of the car park. We have laundry, communal laundry, although some people still do have washing facilities in their flats, but we have a communal one, and there's a charge. We make a charge for the guest room. We have a guest room here. It's very minimal. It's £15 a night to use our guest room, which is, I keep saying it should be more in London, guys, come on. But we're looking at that. Actually, it'll always be £15 for family and friends, but it might be more for other people in the future. But our income stream in those kind of things brings in about £9,000 a year. And that's the kind of ongoing things we need. We have the small teams I talked about might ask for, £2,000 from that if they're going to do something in the garden, if they're going to build something, or, we had a new shed recently, for example, and people bid for that. So we're not putting that kind of stuff into service charges. It's controllable, because we don't want to put all that stuff into service charges and then make the service charges, wholly expensive. We're a diverse bunch of people here, and we come from different backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different backgrounds, economic backgrounds. So some people, if the service charges went up, would be a problem. Some people it wouldn't. So this kind of ongoing fund is useful then to keep control of the kind of money we spend and not to put anybody under pressure. We're very lucky. I think you saw a bit of it. We have communal areas here. We've got everybody has their own independent outside space, be it a terrace or a balcony. But we also have really beautiful communal gardens. We've got an orchard and a vegetable garden, which we understand how privileged we are to have that in London. The site was just super that we got. We have a common house, as you know, that's a given in co-housing, and we use that for a variety of things. That's grown over the time. It's been reduced during COVID, of course, because we can't have the kind of outside people come in to give classes, but we have film nights. We used to have Pilates and yoga, discussion groups, celebrations. We use the common house all the time. And as I said, we also have the guest flat. We've just opened the guest flat up again now because where we can. So we don't know how long that'll be open for, because things are changing again. They change every day in these challenging times. And talking of these challenging times, it has been a gift to be here. You think of the amount of people who have been isolating. And although we were isolating in our own flat, so to speak, or we could meet each other in the garden. We created bubbles between people here. Nobody was ever lonely. They might have been lonely for their outside friends, but there was a whole hive of things going on here. It was fantastic. And
Jude, can I just suggest that you just wrap up in a couple of minutes, and then we can have a few questions. That would be brilliant.
Of course, I'm nearly finished. Yeah, I will do.
Lovely.
Thank you. We were able to quite quickly here set up a delivery system. So it was like a farmer's market in the common house once a week where things were delivered. And we're still learning. We're learning how to live together. We're a young community in terms of the community. We're 5 years here. Yeah, it's good. And I think what I would say in summing up, that there are three things that I think are important. They're important for us. And they are that although we don't always agree with each other, we try to allow time for each other's opinions and endeavour to respect each other's viewpoints. It's not nirvana, but we do try, and that is one of our ongoing principles. And there's two aspects of New Ground that have to walk hand in hand for us. One is our home, mainly it's our home, but we also have to ensure that New Ground is successful. So we have to be businesslike about how we run the community. And how it's sustainable. And we have plans in place to look at how to do that moving forward. We will shortly have a 5-year review to look at what we did right, wrong, and indifferently in the last 5 years, and how we want to frame the next 5 years. And finally, I think the most important, kindness and support, to offer it when needed and to accept it when necessary. So that's us today at New Ground.
Thank you very much, Jude. That was lovely, and I'm really grateful for your insight and your, sharing your personal experience. That the living it is really there's no substitute for hearing it from you. So it's lovely, and I do think that film is a really lovely, cheerful expression of a different way of thinking about how life changes, but it doesn't have to be bad. It's a good positive step. It's a really positive way forward. Chris hasn't managed to join us, so I don't think we're going to get another presentation. So I'm really keen that we open up the conversation we'll try not to focus it entirely on you, Jude. Hopefully there'll be a bit, we'll be able to help each other and answer some of the questions without pinning it all on you and your experience, because that doesn't seem quite fair. I had a question which was going to come up in relation to Chris's development as well, because I know that at the Holton Senior Co-housing, they too have a social rented element, which is I think unusual in co-housing, and I just wondered how that part fits with this community of people who've chosen to live together. I know that in Lancaster, in Holton development, they have not yet filled all of the spaces because the building doesn't exist yet. So they're still recruiting. And I just wonder, Jude, whether you've got any insights into how that dynamic works. And apologies, I should have started with questions in the chat, but I've started with my own question. If I can see that Deborah put a question in the chat, and we'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay. Well, the women who started this whole idea that became New Ground, they were very, very clear that they wanted to have a social aspect here. It wasn't just a group of women who might be able to afford to live here. They wanted to widen that out, and it was part of the ethos from the very beginning. And then, of course, we had to find how to do that. And we created a partnership with Housing for Women. And the 8 flats they have, we New Ground, had a relationship with somebody called the Tudor Trust. And the Tudor Trust put quite a good piece of money, 1.5 million actually, to Housing for Women to enable them against buying those 8 flats. Because our project was funded by Hanover Housing Association. And then they front funded the development, and then we bought the flats at a certain point of the building. And of course that made sense because, you know, we all had to sell houses and we didn't have the money, so Hanover front funded. And Housing for Women bought 8 flats with the support of Tudor Trust. And they then, we negotiated with them because, you know, in the lease, it says, in all leases, it says that these flats are for women over 50. And that fitted with the ethos of Housing for Women. But we also wanted to make sure that we had some say in the people who came to live here, that they would be engaged with the ethos of our community. And so really unusually in this situation, we are the people who decide on the tenants of Housing for Women. We have a set time to get the flats filled, of course, but we have in place what we call non-resident members, women who would like to live here, either to buy a place or rent a place. We never have more than 12 people in that little group, and they're very engaged with us. Before COVID, they'd come here for communal meals. They'd come and help in a gardening day, for example. They became friends with individuals and were part of the social life here. So in that way, those women, be they future tenants or leaseholders, they know who we are, we know who they are. They're not going to, you know, they have a time to get to know us and think, is that the way I really want to live? And likewise, do we want this woman in our community? So for us, having that agreement with Housing for Women has been brilliant. But there are partners in that. And as I said, fortunately, we were able to negotiate funds from Tudor Trust to enable them to buy the flats here.
Thank you. That's really helpful. It's a really interesting dynamic and useful relationship, and obviously part of the social motivation for you as a group, and good to see how it works in practice. So so that's really really helpful. Thank you for that. I think Deborah had a question, but I'm not sure whether Deborah can chip in herself at the moment. Are you there, Deborah? No, perhaps not. If you're trying to speak, Deborah, you're on mute.
She's got no microphone or video.
Yeah, I think she said earlier in the chat that she couldn't speak. So if we ask on her behalf.
Her question was about well, there's a question which very often comes up about whether the housing association made any contribution to the cost of building the common house. And common houses are a peculiar element to co-housing, which often cause additional strife when it comes to who's going to pay for it. It'd be interesting to know how that was thought through in your development, Jude.
Okay, the common areas, that is part of the ownership of everybody. So it was part of the price we paid for the flat. It was factored into the price, and in the same way it would have been factored into the price for the flats that Housing for Women bought. In terms of then actually furniture and additional things like that, again, the Tudor Trust have been brilliant. They gave us a grant or some money to furnish the common house, and it covered the cost of fitting the kitchen out and the office out and furniture. So we've been very fortunate. It took us a long time, but we've been fortunate in that kind of support we've had as well. But it's factored into the cost of the flat. So, you know, if there's 25 flats, and the cost of the whole lot was just divided, and you pay for that as part of the thing. So there was no separate negotiation around that.
Okay, that's helpful. And the other part of Deborah's original question was about service charges, and I think you've said that you will share some information about what's included in your service charge.
I'll say, I mean, it's a huge list. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll email it to you.
Thank you. I will share that when it comes through. Quite specifically, the question that Deborah's interested in is whether the service charge is paid by people who are paying rent rather than...
Yes, it's part of the rent.
Yeah.
So, you know, the rent is, they have a very, I never know which is social rent. So the rent is really, it's a very good rent. The rent, if they were paying commercial rent in this area for the apartments they've got, I think it would be about £1,300 a month. And inclusive of service charges, I think it's just under £600 a month.
Gosh, yeah. Okay, lovely, thank you. There's a question in the chat from Padraig about perhaps do you want to unmute yourself and see if you can ask this one on your own behalf? It's a slightly complicated set of balancing things.
Hi, Padraig.
Hi, Jude. Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned the public and the private there, and it comes up a lot with co-housing that members have different perceptions of private and public space, and sometimes some residents kind of intrude on others' private space, and there's boundaries to be kind of set up at the start. So I was just wondering what your experience was of that at the beginning, and you mentioned, I think, that it was a challenge at the start, and how you've negotiated those.
Yeah, it was a challenge, because I think when we finally moved in here, most of us had been sofa surfing at our age, living on our grown-up kids' sofas and the like for 6 months, because the building was delayed so much, and we'd sold our houses, you know, or whatever to free up the money to buy in. And so when we moved in here, we were overly excited. We were like bloody Labrador puppies, I think, you know, and running into each other's places. And soon that got too much. And we developed, I mean, you know, we're older women. We have an understanding of things, I guess, most of the time. And we just developed that kind of thing. It was almost organic, Padraig, you know. For example, during the first 6 months here, I was running down to the tube and I fell and broke my ankle and my shoulder. And the first few days, everybody kept knocking at the door, which was lovely. But, you know, I thought, oh my God, I just want to go to sleep, you know, and you don't know how to be saying, you know, actually, I don't need anything right now. And so we developed a kind of a system. If we were ill or anything, we'd leave the door, because it's a completely safe environment. It's a, you know, a gated development. We'd leave the door ajar, you know, but if it was closed, nobody would knock. And if there was a latch on, somebody would knock to say, do you need anything? You just want a cup of coffee and a chat. And we've set up this system also because, you know, we are all older. that we have a kind of what we call a health buddy, and this developed out of COVID. So we all have one person that we kind of check on each other, not every day, but we notice if the curtains or the blinds aren't open or you haven't seen somebody. So it's very informal, but we do that. And different people need different levels of privacy. Some people are constantly in the garden with a glass of wine, with a cup of coffee, and you think, oh my God, if they never stop talking, And I'm a very social person, but I need a lot of time to myself. To function in other areas, and we've learned that. As I said, I think earlier, Borg, it's like the first year of a live-in relationship. You get to know each other's nuances, and because we were aware of it, we were respectful of it, And now, again, in the beginning, you'd be going out in the morning, you'd be, whatever you were doing, and you felt you had to say hello to anybody you saw, and how are you today, and blah, 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 blah. And you'd have to leave your house half an hour before you wanted to go anywhere to make sure you didn't upset anybody by ignoring them on the way out. But we've learned how to do that as well. So I think it's something that happens. We didn't have to do any policies or stuff. There's enough policies, about all the kind of things you need to have in place. But we just learned, and nobody would, go into somebody's house, without knocking. And we've learned to just send emails. If somebody's going to cinema or somebody wants going to give somebody a lift, you'll just do it on the group email. I'm going to see Nomadland tonight. Does anybody want to come? Or So we've learned it, but it was a learning process. And in the beginning, we were tearing our hair out, but we've gotten there. But as I say, it's like any relationship, only 26 of them.
And could I ask, sorry, Fernanda, I don't want to take up too much time, but just to follow on, I know you haven't had to deal with this yet, but do you have any induction process or kind of plan for anyone new who comes in to kind of catch them up on everything you've learned?
Well, as I said, we have something called non-resident members. So if somebody's interested, we get requests all the time for how do we get a flat there, how do we buy a flat, how do we do this, and we send them a form to fill out about what their interests are, age are, where they're living, do they have to sell something, social, all the usual kind of tick box stuff. And then we invite them along for a communal meal to meet us. And then over time, if they're interested, they get to know us, and then they apply for non-resident membership. And so we know there's no induction in that way. There's nobody going to end up living here that hasn't been involved in some way. As I say, we've got 12 people, 4 people wanting social housing and 8 people renting. It's more difficult to get a commitment from a social housing thing because they're on lists and something else might come up. But we've got 3 women from the very beginning who are really wanting to move in here to social housing, and they're registered now with Housing for Women. So I think we're okay. It's probably going to be like, waiting for a W3 bus. Something will happen to 3 or 4 of us at the same time, and 3 or 4 flats will become available. And then we'll have to start kind of almost recruiting new NRMs, as we call them. But we've things in place for that as well. In looking towards a sustainable future, we're constantly doing things, but we're also going to start doing webinars. And so it's almost like backdoor branding. So people are aware of us, so we can then contact them if places come up and if they want to be part of that waiting. We don't call it a waiting list because it gives people kind of false hope, but it's on it. But we're also now, and this is a difficult one for us, we're also now, the people on our waiting list are mostly in their 60s, but we are now looking towards engaging younger women, maybe even the late 40s, because by the time we all move on, we don't want, we're already top heavy because of how long it took to get in here of older women, and we need to have, younger women joining. So yeah, I mean, that's obvious, but it's a difficult one because some people don't like talking about that here because they're at the other end of it. So we have to be very, mindful of not upsetting people. But we have thought it through. We've also thought through, what happens, because we have become, it's like a very tight neighborhood. It's an intentional community, and you make close friends with some people, and other people are just the kind of people you invite in for Christmas drink, for example. It's not all palsy-walsy. I personally couldn't, for example, I couldn't have those kind of deep relations with 25 people. It blew my mind. But, you know, we're all friendly and supportive, and we have that ethos. But we've also looked at how we are, because we are a close community. I mean, I'm being facetious about saying those things, but we are a very close community. And when somebody dies, and we have 2 or 3 people in their 90s and a couple of people ill in their 80s, that's going to be a shock to us. And, you know, your point is good, Paul, because the person who comes in to replace that person, although they know us, it'll, you know, we laugh, it'd be like an ambulance chaser, you know, how are we going to make them feel okay that they haven't been waiting? Because the only way they're going, I can't imagine anybody moving on and selling, because it's idyllic, you know, here. So the only way somebody's going to get in, somebody ends up and, you know, has dementia, they go into care, or they die. So we're conscious we have to then be careful and of the person that's coming into that space. But we've talked about that.
Thank you, Jude. Thanks. That's great. And it's always really interesting to think about that future proofing, and interesting that you're looking down the age ramp to make sure that you really are looking at a longer term future. Yeah. Becky, I can see you've put your hand up, but I'm just going to chuck in this question that's also been waiting in the chat. Apologies, another name I will mispronounce. Isolde. The question is about if you'd like to ask your question.
I just wanted to ask about the very start, how you came together. Were you from a local area? Was it community? Was it strongly community based? And how did you, just what the practicalities of, or from right at the start, getting off the ground? Thank you.
Okay. I think I wasn't involved. I mean, I'm the last person to come to live here, so I wasn't part of all that building, in the beginning. But it started over somebody sitting around, the table, as one does, in your, early 50s. If you've got kids that have gone off to uni, or they've gone off, or they're gone anyway. How are we going to live? And divorces and deaths happen. How are we going to live when we're older? We don't want to be done to. We want to live independently. We want to have those years as full as possible.
Apologies, I've just turned your sound off. Can you unmute yourself, Jude? That was an accident.
That's okay. I don't know where I was, but so it started off with a group of women and their husbands and different people saying, how do we want to? And by the time they got anywhere, there was 3 women of that original lot left. And then they realized they really wanted to do it, and they started asking around. They put ads in places. It was very difficult in the early times because they didn't have a site. They were spread all over London and Hertfordshire. And so trying to then get into a local community saying, we are going to be doing something in this community was really difficult, of course, because you didn't have a space. It took 10 years to find this space, but they started going to different house build fairs, different things, talking about what they wanted, and slowly people started joining. It became a social thing to begin with, and then it became serious, and it became really serious when they found the land. And they found the land in High Barnet, in Hadley Wood in North London. And once they found that, then they started going to the local community. They wrote to the council, and they leafleted via the council all social housing tenants over 50, saying if they were interested in something like this. One of the women talked about that in our council house. She'd never done any engagement. That's Janet. Janet is deaf, and she felt completely isolated when her family growing up being deaf, and there was lots of reasons, and she joined here. We put ads in local library, we gave talks, and slowly then the core group came together. So it was hard work. I don't think it'd be so hard work. It would be such hard work for people now. There's UK co-housing, there's lots of hubs, there's things set up, but really we were doing it in the dark, so to speak, but it did happen. So if it happened with no kind of framework, it will happen for other groups, that's for sure. There's lots of fledgling groups now, getting lots of support.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jude. So Becky next, and then Lisa. I'm conscious that we're into our last sort of 10 minutes now. So Becky.
Yeah, it was just following on from what you were talking about before with people on your waiting list. Has there been any discussions about another scheme and maybe encouraging the people who are on the waiting list to try, because it may be a while, to try and do another scheme like what you've done?
We have done, yeah, and things have happened because in the early days, I mean, before COVID, we used to give maybe 4 times a year, we'd do an open house for people who are interested in co-housing and invite them here and talk about how to set it up. But our rhetoric was always about finding your own site, doing it. There's so much support now. And there's about 4 groups just about ready to go, and we support them and advise and help. And yeah, so that's what we say, you know, yes, you can become part of our community. So we never use waiting lists because people feel then there's a possibility, and there might not be a possibility. But we're constantly now saying, look, if we can do it, you know, 25 older women and find a site with no support, you can do it. So we're very positive in pushing people to do it themselves.
Brilliant, thank you. Lisa?
Just a question. I'm probably, like many people, have had a lot of experience of supporting my parents in older age and through a lot of illness. And I'm very keen to not place my daughter in that situation. Just a question around what you've agreed together as a community in terms of supporting one another. So if, for example, somebody did develop dementia, and, you know, what role you might play in that, or whether you feel there's any role. I'm mindful of things about, you know, good communities can actually have lots of assets and can support people that if they lived on their own would probably struggle. But within a community in a familiar setting, they can often live independently a lot longer. So I just wondered what you probably thought through some of this.
Oh yes, we've thought that through completely. And what we say is we offer support, but not personal care. You know, there's no way we're going to, we would, in the same way, you know, Lisa, you talk about your daughter, I would never want my daughter or granddaughter to have to give me personal care. And we protect each other here in that way. But taking dementia into account, we have only one main entrance into this building, and the gardens are safe and there's people around. So, I mean, there's a couple of people who are, I won't say they've got dementia, but they, you know, they aren't as mentally on it as they might have been previously. And we watch out, you know, but there's only, as I say, one entrance, so people couldn't go wandering outside the thing. We have agreed that if it gets to a place where we might have to, if somebody does get it, we will close the doors at certain times, or we will only have a certain key, so people can't get, somebody couldn't get out, for example. Not to imprison them, but we'd have a different system of leaving the building, so that, for example, somebody who might be prone to wander couldn't leave. We have the health buddy system that I talked about earlier. But if somebody became either physically or, you know, or whatever happens to them, if it became something that they needed full-time care, we've already agreed amongst us that we then would talk to their family about, in the same way a family would talk, what next? You know, we have a guest room. In the future, it might be that a carer might stay there. If you've got a 2-bedroom flat, a carer could stay there. And we are hugely supportive. I mean, people have been in hospital with cancer operations, with broken bones, as I've had 2 of them. And I never cooked a meal for the 6 weeks my arm was in plaster. Somebody brought food to me every day. I didn't ask. They automatically, it's a bit like potluck. They create a road and there was always a meal for me. And it's, you know, and I'm conscious of what you're talking about, you know, when I had those breaks, I'd never had anything like that in my life. My daughter or granddaughter didn't have to worry about me. They didn't have to, oh my God, who's going to bring us something today? All that stuff. And you know, I always think we're the sandwich generation, us lot, you know. I've looked after a father who, you know, had dementia and ill. I looked after, he was in Ireland. I was going back and forward every week when in his later years. And you're at the same stage where you've got your kids who need support with their grandkids, and it's like, oh my God, this is my time, stop, leave me alone, you know. So I don't feel I'll ever, put that pressure on my children, because there is a support system. We're all in the same place here, and we would support each other, through up to a certain point. But if it becomes, as I say, personal care, then we'd bring somebody else in. But we can bring carers in. Somebody was in hospital and needed dressings every day, and somebody came in every day. We organised that with social services, because obviously she didn't want somebody else doing that kind of personal stuff, because you want to preserve your own privacy and dignity. So we've talked about all those things. But so I think living in this kind of community is as future-proof as one possibly can be.
Brilliant, thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Lisa, or is that
just a tiny bit? Is it unmuted?
Yeah.
I just wondered, is there any research going on? Because you talked, there was a big thing in the film about reducing the demand on health and social care services. Is there research to evidence that? Because I thought a really strong argument to funders, public sector particularly, to shift them of their funding to support schemes like this would be to actually be able to say, I mean, I think you give a very strong case, but is there actual evidence? Is there some research being done to?
There is, yes. We're part of a research thing, but it will be over 10 years, I haven't gotten involved with it because I mean, I'm on the buildings team here, I'm on the communications team and the hallmark team, so I'm not involved with that end of it. But there's about 10 people here who are involved with university that's doing research on just this, on how this living like this actually reduces the costs on social care. There's only been one situation in almost 5 years where we've had to ask support from social services, and that was just to get somebody's flat. They became immobile, and the flat had to be adapted even more so than it had been in the building. And that was the only time we've had to call. Oh no, one other woman needed help in cleaning every day, and she didn't she couldn't afford to bring a cleaner in, and we got in touch with social services, and so we have reduced the cost on social services in this area. The local planners didn't want us in this area, and their reasoning was that we were 26 older women who would be demanding, would be putting extra burden on their services, and that was actually voiced, and when we moved in, and shortly afterwards, we won quite a few awards. I mean, Marmalade Lane now are getting all the awards at the moment because they're the new kids on the block, and Frances there is brilliant, who you'll meet this afternoon, we got lots and lots of awards, and there was one award ceremony at I don't know, some hotel in town, like Cafe Royale. It was a big thing going on with Reba, and two of the older women who started, they went up to receive the awards, and then there's a photo thing, and our local councillor happened to be there and just photobombed himself into the back of the photograph. That was the first time we met him.
Yeah, very interesting.
It's typical, and they were here at the opening, because there was press, and they were here, and now they were like a flagship for them. Anyway, there you go. I've just seen in chat that Maria Brenton has an awful lot of she's somebody involved. She's one of our NRMs. She has a lot of research papers on just what you've been talking about. So maybe Deborah has put that up. So Deborah, I don't know if you have it, Deborah, then you can pass it on to Lisa.
That would be great. Yes, thank you.
If it's not passed on from your own group, if you let Fran know, and I'll then get it back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If anybody has anything they'd like to share, you can do that via me. That would be fine. And I can do a round robin to see if people want to exchange emails respecting people's privacy boundaries, as already discussed. Fantastic. I am really sorry that we haven't been able to hear from Chris as well today, but you've done a fantastic job, Jude, answering all our questions, and we're enormously grateful for you sharing your time and your personal take on it. Because it is about what it feels like, very much in your circumstances. There's the situation that you've chosen to put yourself in now It's really important that people understand the pros and cons, and the things that take work, and the fact that actually choosing almost any way of living with other people is going to be a work in progress. And I think it sounds like you've all approached it with the mindset that you will make it work, and that although, as you say, you won't always agree, there's got to be opportunities for honest discussion and respect, and there should be more of that everywhere you go, shouldn't there? There should just be more of that. So
most definitely, I agree with you.
Very, very much in keeping with today's vibe. Just on a sort of general rounding up sort of note, I'm kind of thinking that Chris, who hasn't been able to join us for technical reasons, may have some slides, in which case I will ask if I can just add them to a circular email after the event. They may not be completely self-explanatory, there may be more pictures than words, so apologies if there's stuff missing there, but Becky has put in the chat the link to the Halton Senior Co-housing web page, I think. Is that what you did, Becky? So there's a little more information there. You can find out about that option too. And it, really, I've been completely overwhelmed by people's willingness to share their stories. I just think it's great, particularly actually co-housing, but community-led homes in general. People are so keen to evangelize about what they're doing, and that came through really nicely in the film that we saw about the new ground development. This is, once you're in it, this is the most obvious solution to so many housing and social issues that we identify, that people do become very passionately committed to helping other people achieve their aims, and that's such a wonderful position to be in as someone trying to help share that knowledge and enthusiasm. So once again, big thanks to Jude and to everybody else for chipping in and sticking with us. If anybody's got any last minute questions, we can stay on for a few more minutes, but I think we've probably put Jude through the ringer.
No problem, no problem.
And
I wish you all luck, all of you people who are, if any of you amongst you are either supporting people, if you're architects, I don't know what your background are, but whether you're trying to do something like this to yourself, or you're supporting people in setting it up, whether you're planners, architects, I wish you all the best. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you very much indeed, all.
Thank you all.
Cheers. Bye-bye.